Hi, I'm Paul Hemp, the Editor-in-Chief of CIO Straight Talk, and I'd like to welcome you to this, the latest in our series of CIO Straight Talk interactive webinars. Today's webinar is entitled Enterprise of the Future, Thinking Ahead to Stay Ahead, and it features Paul Reyes, the VP for IT Infrastructure Management and Operations at Energy Future Holdings, a big utility company based in Dallas. Paul is an accomplished and seasoned IT leader who has driven transformation at both his current and past organizations. At EFH, he's a member of the IT executive team reporting to CIO Kevin Chase. He and his team provide strategic leadership in the management of IT operations, data center services, global network services, end-user computing for EFH's corporate function and to its operating companies Luminant and TXU Energy. With a global support organization of 250 outsourced personnel and 60 internal resources, Paul and his team are building on the positive momentum of the past several years, focusing on delivering, the ideal of reliable and efficient IT services to each part of the business at a lower cost and by leveraging new innovation and increased automation. Paul, before joining EFH in 2009, Paul had more than 20 years of professional experience at companies such as the Raytheon, Blockbuster, and the U.S. Air Force. You'll find a detailed bio about Paul in the speaker bio box in the left-hand corner of your screen, which you should see there on the screen. So, Paul, welcome today to CIO Straight Talk interactive webinars.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Before I turn things over to Paul, let me explain a little bit about CIO Straight Talk and just mention one or two housekeeping matters which will make your experience more enjoyable. CIO Straight Talk is an award-winning global community of business and IT executives who share a passion for learning through particularly peer-to-peer, experience-based practitioner insights. Our motto or our kind of logo says for CIOs from CIOs. The idea that it's being peer-to-peer learning, sharing insights that people have gleaned in their own jobs. It's a multi-channel platform. We have a print magazine and a digital version of that, webcasts like this one. There's a LinkedIn community, CIO Straight Talk LinkedIn community, Twitter handle. We run a series of events, a YouTube channel, all with the aim of allowing practitioners to share and gain insights based upon their work experience. Across those channels, we currently engage about 8,000 business and IT leaders. And I should mention that the Straight Talk is sponsored by HCL Technologies, but it's not meant primarily to further or promote HCL's point of view, but the point of view of practitioners. So a few housekeeping rules for attendees. On your screen, you'll see a slides box, a Q&A box, and the box I mentioned that it includes Paul's bio information. At the bottom of your screen, you should see a number of widgets, and I'd urge you to use the Twitter widget to tweet during the course of the webinar if it so moves you. It's the second one from the right, and you should tweet at the hashtag Enterprise of the Future to tie it to this event. You may also key in questions for Paul At the Ask a Question box at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you simply type in the question and hit the Submit button. And while we hope to have Paul address some of your questions at the end of his formal session, I'd encourage you to submit those questions as they come to you during the course of the webinar while they're fresh in your mind. If we're not able to get to all the questions, we will ask Paul to respond to them individually after the webinar. And if you're also having any technical problems with seeing or hearing the webinar, please type your problem into the question box, and one of our technical people will try to solve your problem. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Paul. I'm sitting right next to him in his office in Dallas today, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say about the enterprise of the future and how it's taking shape here at Energy Future Holdings. Paul?
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. All right. So I'd like to first talk about what is our infrastructure trying to do with our direction. Like traditional IT infrastructure groups, we end up having challenges with our business because we're lower down in the layers, and we consider a lot of times to be the red tape and the roadblocks to some of the innovation that the business is trying to accomplish. And so we took a hard look at where we were at and where we were going, and our driving goals for our objectives was driving an efficient, agile model that allows us to enable the business and allows our infrastructure team to get out of the way, to drive that ability to partner with them and then drive an enablement through either process automation and orchestration, looking at our long-range budgeting planning, what we call LRP, and align that to the strategic roadmap of our business, and then rebrand infrastructure services to be more of an enablement, commodity enablement, easy solution that allows them to deliver their vision. We also have a goal to partner with our outsourcing partner and improve their performance across the board with us, because they're a key partnership in our delivery. We have application outsourcers, we have infrastructure outsourcers, which HCL is a part of, and we look at ourselves as one team. So keeping the performance across the board is very important. And then lastly, embracing alternative ideas that allow us to become the broker of IT services to our business, not just deliver infrastructure services, right? And so we want to be able to, if the so desire business to go to the cloud, then we want to broker that deal so that we can see that vision across the board and make sure we control and enable those services. So if we happen to look at where our goals were over the years and started with our history in 2009, which is when EFH brought in an internal IT department because we were 100% outsourced at that time. When we started looking at our environment in 2009, we had 18% of our costs being escalated year over year. It was just a growth of 18%. And we had over 90% of our infrastructure was either out of support, out of sale, end of sale, and so we had challenges with legacy environments. Our confidence within our business continuity and DR and cyber areas was terrible, where we even had outages in our entire data center and would not take a choice to cut over to our disaster recovery environment because the confidence level wasn't there, right? We never actually cut over the business to it, and it was enabled as a target in case world disaster happened, not if we just need a failover to recover. And then lastly, our system availability was at a 97.9% available at the infrastructure layer, not at the business layer. So we've taken on a lot of impact at that time, hence a need for change. As we went into last year, 2014, we were achieving a 99.98% reliability, and that is at the application layer, not at the infrastructure layer. And then with that reliability improvement was over 90% over since 2012. We also had a 25% reduction in cost to run IT since 2009, so that 18% of increase has dropped down to now a 25% of decrease. And then lastly, we've gotten to a point where only 20% of our infrastructure was end of life. As we look into the future, and at the time when we had these metrics, it was 2014, so we looked a couple of years out, We wanted to target driving our reliability to a 4.9 availability to our application layer. We also wanted to target greater than 20% of OpEx cost reductions so that we can drive a continuous improvement as well as cost efficiencies. And the goal here wasn't just to save costs for saving cost purposes, but to take that OpEx and drive that investment back into the business so that they can leverage that cost reductions as a new innovative idea to drive back into IT. And then last, we had we want to target less than 10% of our systems to be end of life so that we can cycle through a rotation of refreshes. And then automation of our systems and delivery, not only at the infrastructure layer, but all the way up to the business process layer. And start driving that automation throughout the life cycles so that we can leverage our business and drive business value. The last bullet there was really wrapped around Tier 1 environments that when we said previously we didn't have DR, I'll talk about it here a little bit later, but we now have over 13 mission-critical environments that we fail over to another data center and run business there for X amount of time and then fail back. So we've enabled the capability to now move and migrate workloads across data center sites and run them. What's not there is the automation of all the activities to get to that one site or the other. So it takes us, a couple of hours or so to fail over a system. What we want to do is when that occurs that we've automated those functions and features, driving, of course, more cost reductions. So as we start looking at how we're going to accomplish that target and direction, it really boils down to most descriptions around technology, people, and process. At a very, very high level, we want to build for the future in mind. We want to make sure that automation is key in every single deployment we do, not an afterthought. And then we want to also target always removing waste. In other areas of DevOps, they call that technical debt. We want to make sure that we're always thinking those at the forefront when we deliver our technology. And from a people perspective, we want to enable our people so that they drive that target and vision through all our layers of support. And then we want to address a culture of change, that driving not just a physical change control, but also an organizational change control, allowing people to think differently and seeing that says, hey, we've never done that before. Yeah, but think differently and thinking what's the possibility of doing that. And then empower our people to drive that direction. From a process perspective, which is probably one of the silent killers here, is we usually think of process after the fact. We want to enable our governance that allows us to manage and look at our processes and govern them throughout the life cycle to hit our outcomes. We want to look at our processes so that we shift work left. And if you think of a life cycle from requirements to design, build, test, and deploy, a lot of that work effort of process is at the deploy stage of the house. What we want to look at is in our process, how do we shift that work further up work stream into the design and the build side of the house, into the test areas, so that we can find our defects up early rather than in production, right? And so those shift left work efforts are driving some of our activities. And then change to think of our process work to do that first rather than after. If we deep dive into that and look at the journey of how did we come to that, you would first look at in 2010 and 2011, we had, as we stated earlier, a lot of out of support, end of sale environments. They were standalone, had high maintenance, high power. And we looked at how do we assess those and then refresh those by consolidation. And like any other major group, there was a lot of virtualization talk then in 2010 through 12. And we put out virtual farms, we did cost reductions, so we had capital consolidation, and we ended up creating license clusters and saved a lot of money in 2012. It was really good. We moved from physical to virtual, and a lot of folks would call that a private cloud. And at the end of the day, it wasn't. It was really a virtual farm, right? And the cloud for us was not visible because we didn't have it as a service. As we started migrating into the 2014, we had to address a lot of the availability challenges that we mentioned earlier. And so we targeted three key areas: operational change management and compliance. With those compliance areas and all those three different areas, we improved our availability to the business to a 99.98% available. and with a high security focus. We have PCI, we have NERC, we have SOX, HIPAA, we have all of those environments as well. So we have to make sure that we're secure and maintained. And so that focus drove us to a higher level of availability and driving that stabilization into our environment. As we look into 2015 and this year, we're really focused around standards, service management, automation, and converged. That brings that virtual environment, as we used to call it private cloud, which it really wasn't, now to, hey, how do we produce our services just like any other cloud services in public or private, and then offer them to the business on demand. Packing that in a different method was really key for this year's success. So we were driving private clouds as we see here. And then in the future, drive that to computing clouds, whether it's internal or external, or is it in another person's data center, irrelevant of where the location is. We want to be able to dynamically provision and offer those services as a catalog item with self-healing and automation throughout. And so then we become the IT brokers to our business rather than just an afterthought. So if we look at what that future target looks like, we really wanted to focus around three main work areas. A private cloud service that offers up services with various levels internally to our company, but at the same time provide them just like any other service. And then provide flexibility in our workspace that allows us to have any app on any device, on any location, and provide those services seamlessly throughout no matter what device we have. And we'll drill into the services that we have wrapped around in those areas. And then eventually couple those with a public cloud service. So allowing our customer not to care where their services are being offered from, that they just know that they're being able to meet an SLA and they're able to meet a cost structure. And then we decide whether or not those services are right for internal cloud or external cloud services. We wrap all of this wrapped with automation and workflow and processes that allows us to improve our quality and keep that high availability to it while at the same time reducing our cost. So if we deep dive a little bit further, this drives a vision of a service catalog offering that has our customers consuming services in a self-service model, driving it through automation and orchestration that provides for provisioning, self-healing, monitoring, and centralized monitoring. And in that centralized monitoring, not only monitor infrastructure layers, but allow business to see their business process layers. What does the customer experience look like, and what does that end-to-end process look like as we consolidate all those tools in a manager of managers and provide that visibility into the business health, not just infrastructure health. And then where do we focus on this year is into that private cloud services, offering up converged services with a software-defined focus, and enabling us to provide those services within standards of small, medium, large, our gold, silver, bronze, that brings us to a consumable effort to our business. And then as we look into the app, any app on any device view, then that brings into consideration our VDI and mobility strategy. So if we zoom in a little further to how does that affect our projects this year, we focus around into a project that we call Automation and Converge Project. This aligns to our future state that will focus specifically around our mission-critical systems environment, what we call Tier 1. And we will drive all those Tier 1 systems into this converged environment, allowing us to use vBlocks for that availability, and then provide a service catalog item that allows people to consume those services on demand, whether they're here at a high available across data centers or locally into a lower environment farm that we have for cost savings. Orchestration and automation is wrapped around all of this with VMware's tool sets as well as CA tool sets, and allowing us to have visibility into all the different layers of monitoring. And then eventually at the end of this year, going into next, we'll then touch on the provisioning processes to do into the public cloud areas so that we drive a services-driven view, allowing us to then improve quality to our business, reduce costs, and keep focus on our business vision. Okay, so how do we sell this? And we ended up saying, hey, if we really want to do this, we're an infrastructure group trying to do a business, effort, and this price tag was a $20 million price tag. It was not cheap to go deliver a vision like this and put a foundational item to a business process that says, hey, by the way, business, I know we didn't, budget for this, but by the way, I need $20 million. Can you give that to me so that way I can lay this foundation for you? And of course, you can imagine what a board would say in the midst of our current environment. We would say, what's in it for me? What are you doing for our future in this? So we really looked hard on how do we align our long-range budgeting planning and strategic direction, and where do those all come from? So from an infrastructure VP perspective, I have core, we're usually, infrastructure groups are usually the highest budgeted item. To run IT is expensive. And so usually they're wrapped around labor, which includes full-time employee costs, you got outsourcing costs, consulting costs, all those are in the labor bucket. It's a huge bucket. Then you have software buckets. Then you have hardware buckets. And you got telecom. Those are your major, no matter what company you're in, those are your major buckets of cost. Everything else is more than likely noise, rounding errors. I mean, hey, if you want to cut budgets for somebody's cell phone or lunches, those are just rounding errors, right? They're nothing compared to these big buckets. So we focused on that. We looked at what do those big buckets look like. Hey, we can reduce server counts, physical infrastructure, which drives hardware maintenance and software maintenance and labor cost reductions. We can do rack space consolidation and storage consolidation and database licensing. So create virtual farms of license pools, enabling us to get 83, 78, 48 worth of percentage of reductions in our environment that equated directly over to either a hardware software maintenance reduction, a license reduction, or some type of labor reduction in some sort. By becoming more efficient in those big buckets, we can drive a year-over-year reduction in my operational budget. So he says, tell you what, business, I will ask for $20 million, and in return, on my long-range plan, I will cut out $50 million out of my current budget. And over 5 years, you'll return $50 million for the $20 million investment. Now it became very business aligned. Right? Okay, great. Now you got the cost aligned. What else are you giving me? Well, not only am I delivering a cost reduction story, but I'm also giving you time to market. I'm giving you quality improvements. Your HA is going to be recoverable. Now you're going to be able to actually meet your BIA, your business impact assessments, to keep availability across data centers, which we couldn't before. So then the story became very relevant to a business owner, right? And then, so with that commitment, we says, okay, let's go ahead and kick off the project. Let's go and do automation and convergence. And let's focus around critical system infrastructure refreshes and target meeting that business impact analysis needs and provide 5 nines of availability at the infrastructure layer, which will then equate to 4 nines of availability at the application layer, the business layer. That will drive a hard focus wrapped around cultural shifts in how we do business today, right? Today, they're always manual. We got 10 people that want to build servers, and hey, why are you still dropping a CD in the thing to go build a server? Just click a button and make it easy. And that model is a whole total shift of mentality. So we wanted to focus around automation. How do we become agile and flexible to meet the business's needs and improve our quality while we're provisioning, expanding, doing failover, create self-healing environment, and provide repeated quality. If we look at that focus, that service operating model then becomes a hard look at how we run IT. It was providing IT services as a service, whether they're here locally or in the cloud. And then we're going to create that foundation all within converged infrastructure that we leverage it with our partnership with VCE. So that's kind of that high-level story of where we're going with this project to deliver that $50 million of investment of cost savings or avoidance throughout the next 5 years. So what this comes with is a converged infrastructure that we wrap on with VCE, and then driving complete automation throughout each of the life cycles, starting with infrastructure provisioning and then going in the out years all the way to application process automation. we have to do, of course, as you imagine, a ton of performance testing. That's going to have to say we have to focus wrapped around performance testing. And if you look at what the delivery is, of course, maintenance and support cost reductions. Well, where does this fit within our long-range plan? If we looked at our 5-year roadmap, do we just want to do Converge? No, we looked at the long range as being a foundation, and then this being built off of that to be where people look at DevOps as a long-term strategy, allowing business to say we need to go to accomplish X, and being able to go not having to wait 6 months to deliver that service, but go through and says, hey, here's what I would like, get a mock-up agreement with IT, and then by the end of the week, deliver that service right into production. But at the same time, not foregoing quality, not foregoing testing, not missing out on all the different landscape promotions, right? So how do we do all of that at the same time is a heavy focus in the DevOps in the out years. And this just provides us that stepping stone to get there. And then, of course, not forgetting that all that provides us with more than $50 million of savings in the cost avoidance to the next 5 years. Now, the key thing about the business here on this one is I've already taken it out of my budget. The question is, how do I make sure it happens is the question, right? All right, so as we start looking through the next steps, the technology is just one area that we want to address in this. And that's just, of course, this is the focus on this year. But there are other areas outside just the converged infrastructure. There's a slew of various areas that a customer needs or a business needs to focus on to make sure all of that works, because it's just not a technology story. We've got to make sure that we're addressing monitoring, and how do we look at monitoring throughout the life cycle, not only at the infrastructure layer, but all the way up the stack, and allow people to have the same dashboards as they tie things together. And looking at the capacity management over time, not just from a physical view, but all the way up to a business process view. And then we look at performance management, release management, and automation, as I mentioned, testing earlier. Service virtualization is one of those areas that is really overlooked, and we're really focused on it for the out year, is how do we get to start shifting left, and in that shift left, say, give the ability to my developer to say, hey, I really want to test, but I can't because I can't simulate production load in a lower environment, dev environment, right? Well, to do something like that, you got to have auto provisioning already enabled. You have to have automation of test cases already enabled. So those prerequisites are what we're going to focus on, so that when we get to a point where we want to enable service virtualization, allowing a developer to go end-to-end business process at a development system on demand, allows them to then test production workload at the lowest possible level and then shift left work so that they can find defects way early in that process. So then with that, we can keep that in mind as a target in our out-year focus. We have to also address how does a customer consume these services, right? What's that full lifecycle management? What's that full visibility? So we're going to focus around IT service management, and I'll describe what we're doing with service management here so that we provide multiple channels to our business to have insight into all of their services that we're providing. Governance, a major killer for organizations if they don't focus on what's that total cost of ownership, what are our SLAs, and keep governing throughout the life cycle, not just after the fact. And so we've had challenges in the past in this area, and so we're going to focus heavily on that this year as well. And then lastly, we wrap it all up as it rolls up to a customer's experience. So I'll deep dive some of the check boxes here shortly. All right, so the three key focus areas outside of Converge, it wraps around really, for my area, into IT service management. How do we get service management and wrap service catalogs and service visibility into reporting and incident, problem change, problem management, capacity management, all of those? Where's the visible view into it? Will be addressed in ITSM. Then we're also going to address the customer's experience in my workspace. We call it my workspace because from a customer's perspective, it's all the things that I do day to day. It's my laptop, it's my mobile device, it's my website that I go to for daily reporting, it's my email. It's all that services that they use at their fingertips. How do we ensure that keeps working and improving while we do all the stuff on the backside? And then lastly, we wrap all this with automation. So when we look, with first customer experience, we've all been there that own service desk, and we know that people have customers. I mean, matter of fact, we recently listened to one of our calls, and the frustration of a customer on the phone when, you know, we're talking IT talk and they're talking business talk, and they get frustrated and not being able to get what they want. And we come back with customer sat surveys from our business saying, hey, we have a problem here, and we really don't know why. And so we have red tape, and, you know, why do IT infrastructure make it so hard for us to just get a software package put onto my laptop? How come I have to go through so many change requests when I just want to reboot my own server? You know, things like that. Hey, I need access to a system, and it takes me 2 weeks to get there. How do we change that visibility into that customer? Well, we first started with our service desk. It's the very first people that people see. And we're going to look at right-shoring that. So HCL is partnering with us to look at how do we onshore some of those services so that business acumen and relationships to our business is tied directly to people that are right here in the state of Texas with us. How do we get that view so that our customer is experiencing exactly what we're feeling, right? And then not only do we have ability to look at an email access to a service ticket and a voice calling somebody up, what are other channels that the customer consume? We got people that want to just use chat. Hey, I like IM. I want to be able to open up a window and then text my view over to you and get that going. I also want to use my mobile device. That's the device I use with all the time. Why can't I access my incidents, my problems, my changes, my reporting, my approvals, all from my mobile device, right? How does that look like so that I can self-serve myself? We got the new millenniums coming in, and they all want to do the things themselves, right? I don't need you to call you. Just to give me something that enables me to do my job, and you can get out of the way. So we're going to focus on driving a ServiceNow usage and driving that mobility with all of these tied together with ServiceNow. Another effort is that My Workspace we talked about. We've partnered up with Microsoft using an Office 365 license model that enables us to be able to find the right personas of our business and seeing where are areas it's beneficial to push them out to the cloud because all they use is Office products, and we can use that at a lot cheaper rate while we manage them and get rid of some of the infrastructure costs we got, or those power users that really need to be internal still and manage them internally. And then whether or not somebody uses the box for cloud storage or OneDrive or local, we're looking at what does that mean for us to be able to drive that usage that allows people to get access to their data securely and with control, but yet using it on demand where they are, wherever they're at in a secure fashion, right? And then really look hard on mobility strategy. Do we do BYOD? Do we not? Do we offer VDI? Do we offer other services? That's a heavy focus into the end of this year. All wrapped around, of course, to drive that customer experience for that end user. So automation. We talked about automation throughout this discussion here earlier. We also looked at where are we automating and provisioning processes pre and post. Completely focused around testing all the various things as we test so that if we don't automate it, then it's not repeatable. We can't do that again and again on our out years. And then the other top portions of it for PCI, SOX, and patching, those are just heavy manual workloads for us today. How do we automate that so that we can alleviate that manual effort and let them business focus and our IT folks focus on driving other changes in other focused areas and more strategic alignment areas rather than commodity repeatable items, right? So really, where's the value? Why do we push our teams both internally to infrastructure as well as to the business all the way up to our app stack to think about automation first? Well, one, it provides long-term savings. As we drive quality up and repeatable processes, we have human error that comes out of here. We have repeatable items that allows us to drive cost out. We also allow us to then improve our quality. When we have 10 different people or 100 different people and each one of them do it differently, the quality of that depends on the quality of the person who's paying attention to details. If we become a repeatable process and it's just repeated by the same process each time, that quality is predictable. We know what that output is, and our quality drives up. And then that, of course, then allows our folks, instead of being working 80 hours, throughout the week, we can slim that back down and drive into a nice work-life balance for our folks, right? Work on the shifts that they're working rather than an extended period of time trying to drive all this work. So with that, we kind of recap that all aligns to value that we're providing back to the business. Not only monetarily from a $20 million investment to a $50 million return over 5 years, but from a quality perspective, from a human body perspective, giving them work-life balances, giving them something exciting to work on, all leveraged by technology of Converge and automation from a process perspective, and then service through our service management portal, allowing us to focus on my workspace that allows our business to use their devices to the fullest wherever they're at, and then improve ultimately our customer experience. Well, that really, in a nutshell, is the whole presentation of where we're driving that future target, starting from one environment and driving it all the way up our stack.
Let me say that nutshell is very densely packed with programs, and it's really an impressive, to my mind, description of a sequenced and logical plan that you put together to do this, but also the variety of things you're doing and how they fit together. It seems like a really tremendous transformation project you've undertaken and are succeeding with. We've got a number of questions from our viewers. Let me ask one that I had as you were talking. So another thing that's impressive to me is to see the way all along how you were more than aligning, you were kind of intertwining yourself with business needs. And so what's been the evolution of your relationship with business? What sort of, I mean, I can't believe it's always been sweetness and light. I mean, has there been skepticism from the business side towards your initiatives? Have there been roadblocks? Has there been an earning respect aspect of it? I'm interested kind of the, a little bit of the dynamic of over this roughly 10-year period you're describing here of your relationship with the business side.
Right, that's a good question, because when we first started in 2009, as we going up the stack, the business, our IT department was broken up into each business unit as well, okay. Right? And so the conflict of what's my important is not your priority, is our important, and we had really hard conflict in there. And we started with business stat surveys that was, low 80s when it comes to all the leaders, and leaders being from senior manager all the way up to the CEO of the company would fill out our business survey across every business unit, and IT was a huge black eye in that area. As we started consolidating our teams to start focusing on a single strategy, and over those next years, Kevin Chase, our CIO, has driven a relationship to our business folks that allows us to sit at the table. And we have monthly reviews with our business, sitting down and saying, here's all the efforts that we have going on, and here's what and how it aligns to your business processes. And so not only when we go through, do we just go put in a business case to go get it approved, but we actually run it through every single tower and get their feedback into why this is important for us and them, so that we take their considerations, that when we go deliver a project or a change, it's all eyes wide open and everybody's throwing the thumbs up that says, yes, this is the most important thing to work on. That wasn't always there, right? And so, Kevin Chase and our leadership has driven that relationship building into those layers, so that we then allow ourselves to stay always business focused. And then that's changing. And it's not perfect yet, right? We still have challenges on seeing how we adapt and change through it, but in that life cycle, we're now having a seat at the table.
That's terrific. Where there is that engagement and intertwinement. There's a related question we have from someone here that really relates particularly to that. Were there individual business sponsors who helped act as kind of the go-betweens between your side and the business? Do you think is that an important element? I'm not sure if your case it was. Is that an important element? And if it is, how do you identify and nurture those business sponsors for your efforts?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and the answer is yes. We did have some key folks and key areas that wrapped around the initial benefit of these efforts, right? And they were just the initial champions. So our CIO, let's say we had a business case that we put together that requested almost a $20 million investment.
Right.
And in 1 month had every senior executive sign off on what we call a TDP, a business case, sign off that says, yes, we're wanting to do this investment. But to hit every single business unit all the way up to the CEO of the company all within 30 days. That was a lot of sitting down, briefing, and championing that discussion. But the two key areas is, hey, TXU, which is one of our business units, had a refresh coming up, right? They had to refresh all their equipment. It was over 7 years old. And it was at the point to be able to have to do another multi-million-dollar investment in there. So there was a direct alignment to be able to avoid those costs and come up with a near strategy. So the alignment to our CFO or COO in the business side of the house for TXU was one of our key components. And then on the flip side, same as on our TXU, our Luminant side of the house had a key driver. They wanted equality. They wanted an improvement of dynamic, systems because they generate power. Time to market is not of the essence for them. It's quality of service, making sure that we stay available. So we had a good component in there. And, of course, we had our CFO and his direct reports around strategic planning focused around the financials, right? So we could clearly see this is a clear return on investment, especially if we're willing to put our money where our mouth is and take it right out of our budget up front, right? So those three areas were the key components to say, are y'all all aligned? Yes. And then with our CIO sitting in the room, all the others had questions, push and shove, right? But at the same time, we all got to the same goal, all within 30 days.
And that's an amazing feat. But you mentioned those three kind of core parts of the organization whose buy-in you needed and got. Did you identify individuals within those groups, or was it simply the head of, for example, TXU, or were there some people that you just somehow either had a sense or they'd expressed some sort of indicated some support for what you were doing, where you basically take them aside, put your arm around their shoulder and say, listen, we need you on this? Or was it more organizational? Right?
No, it was the person sitting in that COO role, that person sitting in that role. So in TXU side of the house, we had Scott Hudson sitting with Kevin Chase, our CIO, and then they're saying, hey, here's what's the value add. Here's what we're going to commit to help drive this change for you. And so those people sitting in a room, and so are we aligned? If the answer is yes, then let's go forth out in our teams and bring the next layer in. And so those folks helped drive this strategy because we were aligned to what our long-term vision is, right? Definitely TXU wants to get time to market. They are a presence to be able to be a retailer, not just a selling power, but all-encompassing retailer for our customer. And being able to be dynamic and change and move on the fly is very critical for them. So they really looked at how we align to them in driving this vision.
We have a couple of questions here on some specifics on the various technologies and various tools you use. Let me ask one more kind of a little softer question around culture and organization. As you started this transformation back in 2003 and then kind of accelerated as you went along, and in 2009 things picked up, how much of a change in skill set of your IT people was required?
Well, that's really good because a lot of training, we were 100% outsourced in 2008. As we start breaking that up, our internal team was small. It was literally probably 12 to 13 in my infrastructure area. We're now around 60 plus, I think about 70 now as of today. And that team just grew because we needed senior folks seeing this vision. But at the same time, we were challenging our outsourcers to change, right? So we looked at HCL, and it's aligned directly to me. Throughout those years, we're saying, hey, here's where we're headed. How are you shifting that workload? So let's say earlier, we're heavily in the Solaris area of systems support. As we start saying, here's where we're going virtually. We're going to do virtualization. We're going to do VMware. We're going to do Linux instead of Solaris. Start aligning your resources over that time frame, right? So we came up with a map, told them where we were going to be at what time, and then they got their resources aligned to it. So that was a tell us early so that way we can go and align our people with you as we went through, and as well as we hired folks into that strategic vision as well. Now, as we've settled, we sit there with our partners and align where that reorganization is, and it's really wrapped around a lot of that training.
So I want to actually come to a question somebody else has about partners, but talk a little more, and maybe you just explained it and I didn't follow quite right. It's kind of interesting you were growing your internal staff, kind of often not the case. You think of the internal staff decreasing as you outsource more.
Right,
you were starting with virtually all outsourcing. So maybe you just said this, but why did you need to bulk up your own internal staff?
But it's good, and I had a slide that I've done in other presentations that describes the resource. Mm-hmm. In the midst of our discussion that I said that we've reduced headcount over all the three layers of internal, contractors, and outsourcing, we reduced our resource model over all those three towers. So the graph that I'm kind of picturing in my head is 2009, we have almost 1,200 people, both contractors, outsourcers, and internal, and then today we have around 260, 70 total, right?
Wow.
So that reduction, but if you looked at our internal resource, it's a growth from 13 to now 70, right? And in that, we needed people that would be able to interface with the business and take that business requirements and relate that to our outsourcer so that we can marry the two together and not just put our outsourcer out there with no defense mechanisms and business screaming at them because we're talking two different languages. Yeah. So we had to grow that internal team that looked and understood the vision, that would be able to relate that conversation back over to our outsourcers and provide what we call service ownership. Right? So we had internal folks that had owned the service, and then our partners put service ownerships that sat with them in the box, and then they collaborate over to drive to that end model. So if you look at the resource model over time, contractors and outsourcing has gone down because they've become more efficient. Yep. Our internal resources has grown, but overall, if you look at the total budget, it has gone down considerably, over 24%.
I think it's interesting that role of these internal resources, though, is really, more than just go-betweens between outsourcers and the business. But it seems like it really it needs to be people who really understand the business, who really understand the technology, who can bring those together. That's an interesting. There was another question about outsourcing, and I thought I'd let you address it now. Given the fact that you have a number of different service providers and vendors, any thoughts or tips on managing and driving that kind of, not so much mixed bag, but a variety of them towards a single goal?
We actually have three different partners in-house today. We have an Accenture for our TSU application stack. We have Capgemini, who is our application stack within another business unit, and then HCL, that's a partner. And then we have small ones throughout that are helping with individual projects. And we went through each one of them to align directly with them, and then now we pull them all together in a room. And we're using a lot of technology to try to drive that vision and how to there. Now, are we there yet? Not 100% where we would like to be, but that definitely they all know that they're all part of that same goal. And so on this particular project that we have for Converge, we have 5 different partners also. Not only our internal 3, but we have our 2 business units that are internal, as well as VCE and ATOS that are partnered up with us as well.
And so when you say you're not quite where you would like to be, what are the things you need to either harmonize, or where would you like it to be? How would you like it to work better?
Yeah, I think it really wraps around where I personally think infrastructure team folks don't really spend a lot of time in, which is organizational change management, right? We're a lot of engineers and architects. They think in ones and zeros and solutions. They're not really thinking about the people impact. And so
everything you've been talking about here is about that ultimate impact.
It's customer experience of where it's going, right? And so when you do that, you end up having towers, and I call them towers because it denotes a silo, and it says, hey, this is my part and that's your part, and we're really trying to break down that view, right? And so that's hard. That's hard for each tower to say, I'm no longer a tower, I'm an organization that plays together and mixes between your area and my area. And we have some of that now where we put both people in the box, right? My internal team supports the same thing that my outsourcer team supports, and there's no longer an SLA around just yours and mine. It's, we need to both see it as one vision, and if you have to do some work and I have to do some work, then so be it. We're both heading to the same goal, right? That organizational change management, that's what we're struggling with. We got to keep working on that piece to see that vision. But we're starting with the leadership down. Yeah, this is a part of that, right? We have leaderships that we go constantly. I'm about to go to India here in a couple of weeks to go sell the same story about how we are enabling each other. And we've done that with Capgemini. We have actually a team out in Bangalore to talk to our Accenture team out there and our Capgemini team. And then we do roadshows internally here. So matter of fact, I just came a couple hours before, sitting out at TXU to tell them, hey, we all need a kumbaya on this converged infrastructure. You're one team, right? So it's a constant discussion always happening. And you got folks at the lower levels that I'm working on this as my priority and I'm working on that, and we got to just say, hey, this is this important that we all work together. Don't look at it, hey, they're supposed to do this and we're supposed to do that. If you see something, raise your hand and let's talk about it.
You know, that's what makes your job so kind of whole person in a way. You're dealing with a really complex technology, but you're also dealing with very complex human beings.
That's right.
You're really those two strains of change, human change management, and technological change makes for a both challenging, but I would think pretty rich experience.
It is.
Let me take you off in just a slightly different area here. We have a question about if you could elaborate a bit on the tools that you've been using for orchestrating and managing the hybrid cloud environment.
Yeah, so we have started with, in a virtual environment, invested in our VMware VCAC environment. So we're going to use VCAC with its orchestration, and we have several people, both internally, HCL as well as Atos, all driving a delivery service model within our virtual VM farms with that. Out-year work effort that later this year is enabling our SCCM for Microsoft and the hypervisor area for that. We have ServiceNow being the overarching orchestrator that's coming in later in September timeframe where it goes live. So that will be the overarching service catalog that gets consumed that kicks off our VMware VCAC environment to orchestrate those layers. Then we have pieces within APM, Application Performance Management, and infrastructure monitoring with CA NIMSoft that we leverage for that piece, and then tying those environments with what we have from CA with our security suite of Insight Control, ControlMinder, and SiteMinder, so that we can get people all aligned to authenticating, two-factor authentication, and then kicking off all those processes. So lots of tools that we're using in our environment from a provisioning orchestration model. We're using VMware's tool suites, and from a service catalog item, we're using ServiceNow.
I asked you, we've talked a little bit about kind of culture change and changing the skills and mindset of people working on this, whether they be internal or outsourced or consultants. Give me a little window into your personal mindset. Couple of questions. First, what's keeping you up at night now? As you look out over the, I mean, it doesn't need to be tomorrow so much, that may be too specific, but as you look out over the next couple months, what is your greatest thing that you're lie awake at night and thinking about?
Yeah. Staying up at night is probably not the right term, because I already stay up already. Irrelevant if I'm worried or not, right? It's about 4 hours. But the worrisome piece is really resource alignment, right? That is the difficult thing. Let's look at this, right? We're delivering converged. It's another form of virtualization. We already know how to do virtualization. We already know how to do migrations. We already know how to do refreshes. It's getting 5 different organizations to see one envisioned goal, and them all coming together within a timeline that enables me to meet my financial targets that I already took out of my budget.
Wow!
Right?
Wow! There's no room for play there.
There's no room for quality impact nor missing our targets. Yep. And so that all in itself, when you're at a senior level, dependent on everybody working together to hit that common goal, that's struggling. So we've put some changes recently in our leadership levels of these programs that says, I need people focused on the bigger picture. I need people to kind of bring these people together. So we've changed out our leadership.
Are this within the internal people or also in the outside?
Both, yeah. So both in the outsourcer that came in to go to help deploy.
Right.
We've changed leadership levels on that. Internally to our internal group, we've taken out our project teams and several other tower ownerships and put in, for instance, we put our director over enterprise architecture over this entire organization piece, right? So he has relationships both in each of the business units as well as into TXU's technical teams that he now can leverage and pull together for us, as well as we put a direct alignment to application architects that own each of the work streams, and then everybody reports through them for their success, right? So accountability, and that keeps me up at night, making sure that we can do that and everybody sees that same vision.
So if that's an area of concern, what's an area that you're secretly kind of proud of? That when if you talked with peers in a social setting, maybe had a beer or two or maybe didn't, but you just feel like bragging about, not so much, I mean, you're obviously doing some pretty big things on a broad level, but are there some particular successes that you take some pride in this whole journey here?
Yeah, I think, seeing the team accomplish, we've done, as you saw earlier, 25% reduction of OpEx. This year is going to be another increase. Outside of Converge, we've already are constantly looking at where we take out waste. And we have three business units total, TXU, Luminant as another business, and then corporate EFH. All of Luminant and every one of its databases, both SQL and Oracle, whether they're mission critical or not, for EFH and Luminant has been completely 100% virtualized. Wow. The fact that we can do and fail over systems to multi-data center sites and take out that waste out of that piece is a huge change for us, right? The people that committed to that with HCL and our application teams and our infrastructure teams all together be able to deliver that and see that we can fail over and move to that was a huge accomplishment for us, right? To see those savings, see those reductions. And we've actually been able to leverage it, not that we wanted to, but we had a severity issue where a TIPCO process, which is a mission critical, has to be up every 5 minutes kind of a deal, which has a 20-minute SLA to recover. The entire site went down at our one data center, that it could just not work out. It was corrupted, and we actually had to say, let's pull the trigger. We only have 20 minutes left. Let's get it over to the other data center. And it came up in 19 minutes and like 38 seconds. I mean, literally it was like to the wire. But we accomplished it, right? So the teams feel really good when we say, hey, I said we were going to do this, and we actually did it, and then we actually used it.
You can take some real pride, both personally, but on behalf of your team, I mean, team members, when they to have achieved something.
Absolutely.
That's a terrific thing. It seems to me that you can take some personal and team pride in just this overall program. It's really an interesting discussion of your transformation journey. You're not totally there yet, but it's a great story and a really interesting one. I will say, I don't want to forget, and it makes me think in this context to the audience, that you'll receive a link to a recording of this webinar that you can share with colleagues and even maybe review yourself as a way to look at some of the details, because there was a lot of information. That when I talked about a densely packed nut, that was a walnut that with a mass of that kind of dropped to the floor. A lot of interesting stuff there, and so that people will get a chance to come back and take a look at the recording of the webinar again. Paul, let me just say personally, thanks very much. Great chatting with you, and congratulations on your successes so far, and best of luck going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Paul.
And thank you to the audience for joining us today, and we'll see you at the next in our series of CIO Straight Talk interactive webinars. Wherever you are around the globe, have a good day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.